I'm just going to start by thanking all of the coordinators, especially Dr. Qasim Jan, Mukhtar Ghani from the Geological Survey of Pakistan, Irfan Jan from Peshawar University, Dr. Muhammad Shafiq also, and then Benazir, who has been our hostess, and others who have helped us put this program together. I want to be sure that the organizers hear the gratitude of the community. And then the format that I'm proposing is to have a relatively brief overview of some of the issues that we've talked about over the last several months. I believe we've had 18 sessions. And so I think I will try to summarize some of the critical points that have been brought up over that time period. And then I'll go through a little bit of a review of some of the individual presentations so that the authors and presenters can be honored and hear our gratitude. And then we'll end with a few observations of some issues that are coming up and also stressing the opportunity to pull the effort across the finish line by creating a book of the papers that have been presented. So that's the format. I'm anticipating that I'll speak for maybe 30 minutes, and then I would hope that we'd have an opportunity for questions and answers. Also, relatively small group, so if anybody has a comment or wants to insert some statements, please feel free to do so. We're a relatively small group. So I just want to step back a little bit and think about the Indus River in a global context. And I'm going to be mentioning a variety of other river systems in our discussion this morning. And the Indus River stands proud as one of the major rivers of the world. And it's also a river that flows from high mountains, where it receives waters from snow and ice, as well as rainfall. And it flows into relatively dry country. The Pakistan is a nation that is relatively arid, particularly in parts of the south and Sindh, parts of Baluchistan. And the waters of the Indus River are like the lifeblood of the country. And this is common in other places, for example, in Egypt. If you think about the importance of the Nile, it's true also in the southwestern United States. If you think about the importance of the Colorado River system, it's also true, perhaps, if you think about the Middle East, you think about the Tigris and Euphrates rivers as they flow down across Iraq towards the Persian Gulf. They're feeding waters into desert country. So Pakistan shares this situation with other countries, and the Indus River shares that characteristic with other rivers. The Indus starts its journey up near Mount Kailas in China or Tibet. It has a catchment. It has a catchment that covers over 1 million square kilometers, a huge area of India, China, Afghanistan, as well as Pakistan. The vast majority, somebody maybe should mute themselves. I'm not quite sure. There's some background noise. But the important thing to appreciate is that the river Indus is Pakistan. And without the river, the country would not be there. The civilizations that grew up in Mohenjo-daro and Harappa and others are justifiably called the Indus Valley civilization because they grew up on the shores of the Indus River. And so the country of Pakistan as we know it is based on the waters of the Indus River. And there are tremendous challenges. The challenges are coming because the river is changing with climate change. The sources of water for the river are changing because of climate change. And of course, the demands for that water are going up as the population increases. 75 years ago, at partition, the population of West Pakistan was about 34 million. Today, The population of Pakistan is about 230 million. Almost 7 times as many people are relying on the waters of the Indus River than they did 75 years ago. Pakistan has been growing and growing rapidly. The needs of those people, both for food and for water, has been growing as well. In addition to the population growth of the nation, of course, the city of Karachi has grown as well. And today, 15 million people live in Karachi. And that city, that beautiful big city, is at the very end of the Indus River. And so those people living in Karachi rely on the Indus for their survival. In Pakistan, like in other countries, a huge amount of the water is allocated towards irrigation. We have the same situation here in the Western United States. In Pakistan, almost 90% of the water of the Indus River is used for irrigation, growing crops on the fertile grounds of the Indus Basin. The water that's being used for irrigation is extracted from the river in many different ways, but in some situations, pumps and siphons and other systems take the water out to those who have the capacity to take it. And this sets up what we call a tragedy of the commons, where the water that maybe belongs to everybody, belongs to the nation, is used sometimes maybe in excess by certain organizations or certain people, and others who have less means or less abilities have less access to the water. So there's an equity issue, of course, associated with this water system. And always the water is going to be available first to the people upstream and then later to the people downstream. And as the water is extracted in increasing volumes in the upstream areas, in the Punjab, for example, there'll be less water available for people living downstream for example, in Sindh. So this is a fundamental challenge for the country and for anybody who is administrating the waters of the Indus River. Another important point to think about is that the hydroelectricity generated in Tarbela and in Mangla, two big reservoirs, one on the main trunk of the Indus, the other on the Jhelum River, provide significant electricity to the nation, and consequently a very important factor in the nation's energy supply. It is true that both of the reservoirs, Tarbela and Mangla, will be filling with sediment and ultimately have a finite lifespan, and eventually their ability to produce electricity will be reduced. Again, issues that need to be thought about as we look at the Indus River. Another topic that's commonly discussed today in river systems is the ecology of the river. This would be the vegetation, the animals, plants that live along the river course, the fish, etc. And there's a recognition increasingly in many parts of the world to realize that we need to preserve the ecosystems, allowing for clean water to flow in rivers such that the ecology can be sustained. And this is particularly true in the delta areas, for example, in the regions near Karachi, where the mangrove swamps, the mangrove forests have grown in an area where there's also important fisheries, important lifestyles for people, and an area that needs some conservation efforts. I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. The other thing that's very important in the Indus River, as it is in so many other rivers around the world, is that there are transboundary issues to be dealt with. Different political agencies, different countries, and indeed different provinces have issues associated with the water, and these need to be dealt with. In the case of the Indus River, the 1960 Indus Water Treaty that was set up between Pakistan and India is an agreement that needs to be continually reviewed, and parties need to be able to meet with each other, discuss on a relatively frequent basis so that issues that arise can be dealt with. This is a very common issue around the world, and I speak from experience here in the United States, where I live in Colorado, and our water from the river system that starts up in my state, goes to many other states and down to Mexico. And we have treaty agreements with the surrounding states. We also have a treaty agreement with Mexico, and we're struggling to honor those treaties. And again, it's being done with discussions. In the case of the Colorado River, right now, in 2022, there are severe shortages of water in the reservoir systems in the United States, Lake Powell and Lake Mead, and we are discussing how to curtail the use of the water in the lower states, which would be Arizona, parts of Nevada, California, and of course we're also discussing with Mexico how to allocate the limited waters in the Colorado River. There'll be similar efforts necessary in Pakistan in your discussions with India and perhaps also with Afghanistan as you look at the sources of water in the Indus River. The other thing that's important to appreciate, as I mentioned briefly before, is that you have other countries with similar challenges. So the Nile River is the sole source of water in Egypt. 105 million people live in Egypt, relying on the Nile River water. Our Colorado River, we commonly use the number 40 million people use the water in the lower states. So Pakistan is not alone in the challenges you're facing, and I think that solutions can be found and shared between countries and between river systems. And we can talk a little bit more about that. These solutions will always hinge on education and awareness. In Colorado, for example, we have a program on the internet for water. It's called water22.org, which is for water the year 2022. And we're trying to make information about the Colorado River more easily accessible to the entire population of Colorado. The other things, of course, will be through the use of technology, and there'll be wonderful opportunities for improving the efficiency of irrigation. Already, many countries and regions are looking at sprinkler systems, drip systems in place of flood irrigation. In some areas, crops may need to be changed so that less thirsty crops are used, with, of course, a focus on food crops for people. That's a challenge for us in the United States. Much of our irrigation in the West is for hay and for alfalfa, which is food for cattle, not for people. That's an issue that is being worked on right now. The other thing that's a very important technological component of the equation is looking at better ways to clean water, to make it reusable, and to look at ways in which water can be recycled, particularly in municipal situations. Water needs to be cleaned and treated carefully so that people who are downstream can reuse the same water. We have that exact challenge here in the United States, and we're facing it now. This webinar has had 18 sessions, and we are extremely grateful to each and every presenter. And the common theme in every one of the presentations was this concept that the Indus River waters cannot be protected and valued unless the people know about them. We say in the United States, we say you can't love the river unless you know the river. So there's a challenge to spread the news about the water resources of Pakistan, to discuss it with the entire population of the country, young and old, and to get everybody as aware as possible about the limited resources in the water systems of the Indus. And that's also true of the groundwater. I'll mention that in a few minutes. The other thing that's very important is that we propose to follow on this webinar with a book that's going to be prepared under the auspices of the Pakistan Academy of Sciences and other agencies also. And we're going to consolidate the results of this webinar series into chapters. And we have invited, and we hereby also invite presenters and speakers to compile written chapters and to submit them to us to be edited into this compendium. We're anticipating trying to have the manuscripts in our hand by the middle of September. And there is a format page that Mukhtiar has been sending around so that each and every presenter can examine the format that we're anticipating. And if you could please put together your thoughts, the illustrations that you might have used, and assemble it into a paper. We will then have them lightly edited, and they will head for this volume. And that way the results of the seminar will be preserved for everybody. And as you all know, there is a YouTube channel. Mukhtiar has been sending you individually your YouTube links, but there's a channel, and we might put it in the chat box so that you can see all of the presentations at your convenience. I'm going to now give an overview of the 18 talks, and I'm really going to do this relatively quickly. I don't really have the time to review each and every detail of people's presentations, but I want to bring our attention to the fact that a lot of material was covered. There are some common threads that emerge, and I'm just going to comment on each presentation, and I'll mention the sequence number in which the presentation was given, so that if you're looking through the catalog of talks, you can focus on the ones that might be of particular interest to yourselves. We had several presentations that were high level, giving an overview of the challenges of the river system. Authors discussed the climate change effects and population growth and demand increase on the river system. Senator Nizar Memon spoke, talk number 17. Dr. Alim Takir Sheikh, talk number 18. Dr. Muhammad Ashraf, the first talk. And Dr. Rasul Books Mahar, talk number 8, emphasized the importance of the river waters for irrigation in Pakistan, where it's one of the largest irrigation systems in the entire world. And almost all of the food grown in the country is grown through the waters of the Indus River. Tremendously important resource. Another important aspect was mentioned by Dr. Shahid Azam in talk number 4, is that the mining industry uses water, of course. And then, as everybody is aware, the drinking water supplies of the nation are largely from the Indus River. There's some exceptions. There's groundwater withdrawal. There's a few other small river systems in the country, but the lion's share of the drinking water from Pakistan is from the Indus River. And consequently, between the food supply, the energy supply, the drinking water supply, the waters of the Indus really are the lifeblood of the country, and they need to be cherished. The headwater situation up in the high mountains in the Himalayas, Hindu Kush, was discussed by several speakers. Dr. Zial Hashmi, talk number 7, and Dr. Ataullah Shah in talk number 13 talked about issues in the mountain areas up by Gilgit, and a discussion about the dramatically visible changes associated with warming, global warming, and climate change. Discussions about the potential for glaciers to be shrinking. Right now, there's maybe plenty of water because the glaciers are supplying the water, but those glaciers are not infinite, and they will, in cases, be reduced significantly by melting. The other thing, Professor Matthias Winiger mentioned the catastrophic flood that broke the Hassanabad Bridge on May 7th of this year. And that was the result of an outburst flood coming from glacial lakes. Also, the irregularity of rainfall patterns associated perhaps with climate change, but resulting in dramatic floods like the super flood of 2010. And I gather recent flooding also. Dr. Khalil Rahman mentioned this as well. And there were several comments about the need to monitor the glaciers and monitor the water situation in the high mountains. so that the people living in the plains can be informed of changes in the source waters. Many monitoring efforts are in place, but a steady thread of conversation that we heard was the need for additional monitoring, meaning data gathering in an objective fashion, and then allowing the data to be released in some format so that it can be shared both by the public and by policymakers along the river system. You'll hear us mention this issue about data several times. We talked about groundwater. Groundwater, of course, is a very precious resource, and the groundwater in many cases is recharged by the waters of the Indus and the Indus tributaries. In other cases, if it's deep groundwater, it may be recharged very slowly, and in cases of deep groundwater, it may be a finite resource that is being essentially mined. There was a discussion by Dr. Khan Zaib Jadoun, talk number 12, where he discussed groundwater resources and the need to more closely monitor the water resource, the groundwater levels in the tube wells. It was mentioned that there's over 1 million tube wells taking water out of the ground, and it's a difficult resource to monitor. But Dr. Fazullah Akhtar in talk 16 and Dr. Zishan Ali in talk 10 both talked about the GRACE satellite system, which is a system that is used to closely monitor the Earth's gravitational attraction. And you can actually see changes in groundwater resources from space. An example where new technology can be brought to bear to help inform resource managers, and it's something that should be closely monitored and followed up on. The advantage of the GRACE system is that it's objective, taken from up in space, and it covers a regional footprint. The disadvantage is that the regional footprint is somewhat coarse, the pixel size is very big, and so there's a need for additional monitoring wells, and that was mentioned. Another important thing to appreciate is that while we focused on the Indus River doesn't cover all of Pakistan, in particular Balochistan. It has very limited amount of access to the Indus River. And we had a talk by Dr. Saeed Aftab mentioning issues in Balochistan where the Karez system, that was a way of obtaining groundwater through horizontally drilled tunnels, has largely fallen into disuse. And for those of you who've been in Quetta, you will have heard about land subsidence associated with extracting groundwater. So Balochistan shares the challenges of the nation. There's also an emphasis mentioned by Dr. Farid Alam in talk number 9 to emphasize the need for gathering the data systematically throughout the catchment of the Indus River, to monitor the flow levels, to monitor the extraction levels, and to keep track of the water resources so that the municipal situations such as in Karachi are not neglected. And Karachi is a place where, as all of you know, the value of the river is extreme, not only in terms of the water quantity, but also the water quality. So there's a need for keeping the water as clean as possible so that it can be used and reused downstream. There was several discussions about the opportunity to improve the efficiency of water usage, both in terms of water treatment and recycling. Dr. Imran Khalid in talk number 11 talked about the socioeconomic aspects of the water and also demand management, keeping track of who's using it and how they're using it, was emphasized by Dr. Muhammad Abu Bakr in talk number 3. As we look at the development of infrastructure along the river system, there was a potential mention that WAPDA may be building a barrage in Sindh, and Professor Altaf Ali Sial in talk number 2 described the possibilities and mentioned also that the system needs to be done in the river system modifications like barrages need to be done in consultation with local peoples, and the environmental impacts of these kinds of new engineering features need to be very carefully considered. There was also a talk by engineer Ashrad Abbasi, talk 15, where he mentioned just the fact that the Indus River can serve as an efficient water transport region, and that moving materials, goods up and down the Indus by boat could be a very efficient use of the river system, because of course it's a very low energy method of transportation. We've covered basically the span of our presentations in this brief discussion here, and we're going to encourage our audience members to be very vigorous in the use of any medium tools that you can think of to share the messages about water and water resources in the country among your friends and your contacts. The YouTube presentations that Mukhtiar has made available to us should be shared, easy to do. And I'm going to emphasize perhaps the urgency of the situation, just mentioning that here in the United States, in June of this year, on June 28th, there was a report on the Indus River on our national public radio by Wajhat Malik, who did a 2,000-mile trip on the Indus River, and it was reported in our radio media very widely in the United States. And then just now, right now, the current issue of Time magazine, which looks like this, I just bought it 2 days ago, has a big article on the mangroves down in Karachi, and there's a full color photographs of Karachi in this magazine, and a full description of the mangrove swamps and their ecological importance, and the fact that they're being harvested for the wood resources. And some of this is taking place without proper permits. And there's a considerable area. There's an island called the Boondal Island near Karachi. And you can see that the land that used to have trees is now almost a desert. So these issues are being discussed globally. They're being discussed by different countries and different media. And the Indus River is one of these major river systems of the world that many people are focused on. And we had a wonderful opportunity through this webinar to highlight many of the topics. And why don't we turn it over? I've spoken for about a half hour. Why don't we turn it over to the community for any additional comments or questions? Benazir, you might see if people have questions. I'd be happy to open the floor to anybody who might want to have some additional comments. Thank you. So as people are getting their questions, perhaps Dr. Qasim John could join us and give a little bit of the point of view from the Pakistan Academy of Sciences on the book project and the importance of this topic.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Yes, we have a question from Matthias. Matthias, you can ask your question.
Well, I don't have a question. I just have a comment on it. First of all, I think it's a very nice summary of what we have discussed here in this webinar, and about the outcomes, about the need to approach publicity and so on. That's quite clear. In terms of my own contribution, I would have some comments, of course, because the focus was a little bit different. But what I think we shouldn't forget, most of the contributions, which were very well and very nice, did not really show completely unknown new things. Many of the presentations and many of the aspects have been discussed within ICIMOD, for instance, for almost 40 years now. And there are excellent publications by this institution and by other ones. And maybe in the introduction, we should not just mention the new times, but also what has been done. It has been done a lot. The problem is many of the outcomes have not been transferred into action. But the basic knowledge, I think, is really available. Of course, some aspects should be clarified, data sharing and so on, data control, field work. Not everything can be done by satellites as it has been done, or is it developing in these days. One has to go to the field, to the areas, discuss with the people, control, and so on. But once more, one should maybe mention what has been done, and it has been done a lot of it. That's my first comment now here.
Well, I certainly appreciate that. I think, Matthias, the challenge for all of us is to understand our current circumstance. And I think that, I'll use our own examples here in the United States again, where progress gets made by an individual group or organization, and then it lies in a book or publication someplace, and there's a tremendous need to share the information and to keep it living. And I think that it might be very appropriate for one of the chapters of this proposed book to have a review of some of the past efforts, ICIMOD and others, where some of the, and I'll say that some of the frustration that I've heard you mentioned several times could be addressed explicitly. And because I think that is one of the challenges we have as a scientifically based community, is to keep the threads of knowledge alive and to keep people aware of what we actually do know and what we have done. So I think that's part of what we would hope to do with this volume. And I would look forward to your help in this matter. So again, Ben, I'm not sure if there are other questions or comments, but if Dr. Qasim John is still on the call, I would encourage him to.
May I?
Please.
May I?
Yes, please.
Okay. Actually, speaking of the water rather than the book right now, speaking of the water, it's my personal opinion that because more than 90% of the Indus water is going to agriculture, and our population is going to continue growing. I don't see substantial reduction in percentage in coming 20 years at least. So we, in the long run, and of course there is also the challenge of global warming and maybe a reduction in ice water in the long run. So the country honestly needs to spend less water on agriculture. I don't know how we are going to manage. Obviously, it would be a gigantic task to transfer from the flood irrigation to other methods of irrigation, very, very expensive. But I'm sure that there will be some cheaper ways that we can steadily start practicing those to prolong whatever resources of our water are for agriculture and domestic use. Thank you.
Yeah, we've seen that here in the United States where we have farmers who are converting to they call it center pivot irrigation with sprinkler systems, and in some cases we're using drip pipes. Some of the drip pipes they actually bury underground, so the water comes right to the root of the plants. These are in some cases still experimental, but in other cases they're operational. In Colorado, there are examples of this, and I think that you're absolutely right. Kasim is going to be expensive, but the conversion will be worthwhile in terms of the water saving. The other thing that will possibly happen is that crops will need to be modified so that crops that use a lot of water may be discouraged. Crops like rice, perhaps, crops like cotton, perhaps, may be discouraged in favor of other crops. Of course, there needs to be a careful work with the farmers, the farming community, but eventually in the United States, we found that we need to monitor the water that is supplied. In Arizona, for example, there is a definite measuring of the water. Each farmer is allocated a certain amount according to their position on the canal system, and the crops are being changed in Arizona today. It's happening this season because of the water shortages. So there may be modifications in agriculture that will free up some water for the municipal use. Thank you.
Can I have a moment to speak on the subject that we are discussing?
Yes, sure, sir.
Yes? Okay. Thank you very much. I think since I came in early and then was waiting for the others, and so I may have missed the early part of your, Bob, your summing up, but I suppose it does bring out most of the features that the subjects are there. I'm sure that this book and this publication that's coming up, which is Academy of Science is going to bring in, will document everything that has been said in the meeting, in addition to whatever you have summed up right now. But one of the things is that did I get it right, that you want the manuscript that we have used to be there by the 15th September to be with you, so that it could be compiled? Number one, this is the question that I wanted to ask from us, the speakers. Yes?
Can I respond to that? Sorry, the idea is that we are requesting all the potential authors to contribute a paper on the presentation that they had, and if they want to improve and add some more data, even better. We would very quickly, maybe in a day or two, submit a format on how to write the paper, because after all, if it is a book, then the general layout of the paper should be similar. Not the content, but the general layout, the format of the paper, like the paper should have an abstract introduction and the main body, and if anybody wants some recommendations or conclusions. We are not putting any restrictions. We are just suggesting that a paper of about 2,000 to 3,000 words plus figures would be fine. But again, we are not going to put curbs on the author's style and their content. And finally, what we are saying is that if we get the papers in a couple of months' time, it would take us time to read them, to format them, to try to have uniformity in their style, and then also distribute them. Some of the experts, maybe the ones that we had, for example, here in this talk, my paper can go to you, your paper can go to Bob, so on, so that there is an outside opinion about the contents, the format on the paper. And after that effort, the paper would be sent back to the authors to see if they would agree in modifying their paper according to the reviewers' comments. So finally, I think that it will be sometime toward the end of this year that the book will be published. It's not going to be published overnight because we obviously don't want to lose quality in hurry. So that's the general plan, sir.
Okay, I think that explains, that very clearly explains this. Can I request that if the notes that one has used to deliver the talk on that day can be sent to your staff and they could put it in the format and then return that draft to us? Is that a possibility? Because if it is everything is written, then they could put it in a format and send it, and then we can own the format as put by your staff.
Sir, we are going to immediately send you the format. That would just give you...
I'm just saying that in order, because the people who are doing it, they will know the formats. They can pick up from the content of the talk that has been delivered, and I can send it right away because it's on my system, and I can have that sent over. So for this to be, then what I'm asking is that if your staff could possibly put it in the format that you desire, is there a possibility?
Bob, what do you think?
Well, I think that our staff is relatively thin, but I think we'd be eager to help in any way that's practical. But in some cases, I think the authors will have a feeling for how they want to convey their information, and I think it's going to be difficult to commit to have us write the papers, meaning that even though we have your presentation verbally and we have your figures, it would be difficult for us, given our resources, to write the papers ourselves. So
okay. I
would encourage you.
And I appreciate that. However, the reason why I'm saying is that when giving a talk, there was a lot of extempore material that went in, and that is recorded with you. I don't have a recording of what I said during the discussion. I only have the paper that I have. So that is why I'm saying the recording that you have, and I really don't remember what I may have added on. So therefore, that will add a great value to the paper of each other person. I'm just suggesting if it is a possibility, and then see if it is a possible. Yes, Dr. Saab.
Sir, we can provide the recording. That's not a problem. If you want recording of your own paper, or for that matter, somebody else's paper also, there is not a problem. I just talked to my colleague. And Shafiq, can you say something?
Okay. Yes, actually, sir, we have put all the talks on the YouTube, and we have also given the link of the YouTube on the chat groups. If you could check, just check the chat group, the link is given there. So all the talks that are delivered under the series are already available on that YouTube channel.
No, it will not be possible for us to go through all of those. I'm only concerned about what I said, and the point is that if you don't have a transcript of it, because there is a technical way you can also use the script to turn it into a paper, into a script, and that is the script that I was looking for.
You will get.
I just want to leave this with thought, give it a thought, if possible, fine. If not, we will live without it. The other thing that I'm saying is that you also said that if you're going to send the papers for evaluation, then I think that is, you are asking some of us, I don't know if it is me or anybody, to also get engaged into this publication and the papers of the others. Now, if that is the case, I'm saying then you need to also support those people who are really going to review somebody else's paper and the script. That's what I was saying.
Mm-hmm.
I just leave that thought. In any case, Dr. Saab, I just, in the meantime, while we are going to do this, I think some of the recommendations and conclusions that were made, there's nothing going to happen on those speeches, on those talks, on those discussions between now and the book publication, correct?
Well, yes and no. The point is that we could, since everything has been recorded, very noisy here. Everything has been recorded, so what we could do is actually we can send the information to the concerned departments, and
I think, yeah.
Hopefully they would be able to look into those and recommendation and other suggestions if they want. Our idea was that if we publish the book, of course, I agree with you that we cannot wait for another 6 months, but at the same time, we thought to ensure that the book reaches all the important desks. In addition to that, we are also going to have a soft version of the book that we would place on the internet so that it can be visited by any person for their benefit and use. Okay. But anyway, we look forward to your suggestions in this regard,
I personally think the book is an excellent idea. So far, whatever work has taken place is absolutely fantastic. It's good. It should continue. I'm just saying that many a time these documents remain in the shelves, in the file, and not being referred then. So I think they'll pick it up when they need something from it. Yes, fine. But then I think you and the project must have some kind of a plan whereby at least the way Bob has summarized the recommendations from these presentations could be forwarded. For example, I just have in front of me the conclusion that I made. I said, we must unite to agree on a water charter and in addition to because after that, the economy charter will follow. Now, if these things are communicated right now as part of the summary, because the other speakers, they are very honorable and they are very knowledgeable, and they must have said some of the key points. And if those could be acquired from them and those could be sent to the concerned government department, I think that will add a greater value. And you can also then add that some of those, that these are the actions we took and these are the possible action plan for the future. Because I would like this excellent initiative of yours, Dr. Jan, to continue beyond what we have reached. Because, as they say, Guftan, Nishastan, Barkhastan, that kind of a thing should not happen. I think even when you produce the excellent book document, I think it will, to me, not see the light of the day if these are quickly brought in. Because you must remember that right now Pakistan is going through a change phenomena of whereby the ideas could be plugged into the governments that are coming in and come in now or will come in after the general election that will take place. So I think that will be one of the ways that this project would be more effective. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I would like to say it on behalf of my 4 colleagues. I hope that they would agree with me that when we are going to send you this format and it's going to be in 2 days' time, we would, instead of requesting all the speakers to give us a paper for inclusion in the book, but we would also request all of you to give us a summary of recommendations within 500 words. Within 500 words, we have from all the 18 or people a summary of recommendations, no more than 500 words, and we make a separate document of that. Maybe it will be ultimately attached to the book, but for emergency, we will make a separate book of that as an executive summary, and we will distribute it to all the concerned departments that you suggest.
Okay, very good idea. Good idea. I agree with this. Thank you. I have no more comments. on the subject. I think I'll let the others come in and speak about it also. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. As far as we don't have any other suggestion or questions from anyone else, I think. Let me.
Yes, Zubair wants to.
Zubair. Okay. Let us let me enable his mic first. Okay, Zubair, you can ask your question. As we have to unmute your mic. Please.
Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon. Me, this is Zubair Ahmed, serving as a hydrogeologist in the province of Pakistan. It means Balochistan. First of all, I would like to pay great thanks to the entire team of the NCEG, especially Dr. Qasim Jan Saab, Dr. Shafiq, Mukhtar Ghani, and other all experts who delivered their topics, who delivered their tremendous points about Indus River system. So it was very informative talk, and it was very informative webinar series. So I learned a lot from the same event. So I am looking forward for outcomes of the same talks, in which international and national experts contributed in last 14 talks. So at the end, I would like to request all of my water relevant experts, whether they are national or international. So please think about Balochistan. In early discussions, Mr. Bob, I think he said that Balochistan is the province which covers half our country. So it needs attention regarding water, because we are at alarming condition, especially Balochistan. So kindly think about same Balochistan, and please conduct a webinar series or workshop or any other relevant that. Please think about Balochistan, and we can save Balochistan, and we can do something in Balochistan. So please think about it. Thank you, sir. Thank you, all.
Kassim, your mic is off. Kindly turn that on.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, sir. Thank you for your compliments and for your idea. I think we did have a speaker from Balochistan. The point is that thinking is not enough. We can think, but it's of ultimately no use. The important thing is that there should be some people who can speak out, not in protest, speak out about the issue, knowledgeable opinion, and we would be there. There was one speaker, but if there is another person, somebody who can write a good, nice paper, contribute on the issues of water in Balochistan, I think that I and my colleague would be happy to see if we can incorporate that paper in our book. So the point is that thank you for the suggestion, but I send it back to you that kindly look around. Are there some really knowledgeable, good people on the issues of waters in Balochistan, which can contribute in the form of a small paper, if not a long paper, and we would incorporate that. Thank you.
Okay. If we have no other question or suggestion, I think so. I will invite Bob for closing remarks of this webinar series.
Thank you, Benazir. I think we're approaching the hour. I'd like to again sort of circle back to some of the comments we've heard, and I appreciate that in a very short session like this we can't review each and every topic and title and material that was presented by people. But I think the common thread, if I can look at it from my point of view, the common thread is that the opportunities are in front of us to gather information, to look at it objectively, and to share it not only amongst ourselves and our colleagues, but also to people who are making policy decisions about water use throughout the nation. And I think that the challenges that we have, as was mentioned, is that some of this work has been done several times in different places, but there's a continuing need to keep the information fresh and up to date, and to always strive to make more information available. And I think that Qasim Jan's idea of having maybe a separate sort of a subset of rapid recommendations is a good one, because that way we have, in addition to the book, we might have a critical recommendation segment that could appear either separately or also attached to the book. And then we need to think about way of distributing this information. How do not everybody will buy the book, not everybody will read the book, and so how do we make our recommendations known to the parties who are responsible? And again, we would welcome guidance from the community, suggestions as to how to distribute these recommendations so that everybody can see the results of our work. With that, I'd like to remind us that the community doesn't go away today. The websites that we've mentioned exist. Emails, contacts that you have exist. And we're open to further suggestions and recommendations, all of us. And we are, again, very grateful to the speakers and to the organizers of this webinar series. And I thank you all very much for your help. And I look forward to a time when water knowledge can be more widely based and spread, not just in Pakistan, but also in the United States and across the whole world. So I think that we have the tools to do that. We need to learn how to use them and make the information well known to the entire population. I thank you all very much for your participation, and I look forward to having a chance to meet some of you someday. And if you come to Colorado, please come to visit. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, sir. For final remarks, I will request Professor Dr. Qasim Jan Sahab for the final remarks.
Nisar sir want to say.
Okay, Nisar Mehman sir. Yes, you can.
Okay, thank you very much. I think, Bob, you added well, and Dr. Qasim mentioned about the attachment to the book or separately. I think the book format will be sent to us. I am sure that book will also have an executive summary in any case. Yeah, because it has to have. So that will be there. And if there are certain other things which are going to be separately dealt, maybe then out of that executive summary could be dealt. I don't think it will be a good idea, generally speaking, to do something separately. Everything that we do here should be part of this project and part of the book. And that's one thing. The other thing, Bob, you also mentioned about this community is not going to go away. Wonderful. And I think, therefore, there must be some way the organizers must put in what could be the possible action plan for the future to, right now you have these 18 people, 18 papers coming in, and this is there. What about the other community, the world community? How are you going to also communicate the book and others to that community? Should be part of the action plan. Therefore, one final request is that if you can document this meeting, which talks about the pointer to the website and the pointer to what is going to happen, very short brief, of this today's meeting, because this is a very important conclusive meeting, and this should be on record that what was concluded. And that is what Dr. John could probably issue, and his team, and whoever from the members of the team. I think that will be good. That will be kind of a way forward for us to know, okay, this is what is going to happen and this is what it is. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We would the organizers among ourselves, we will discuss your suggestions on the internet and come up with something. If I agree that there will be an executive summary, but what we could do is, if we properly write it, the executive summary can be a part of. I mean, we can distribute it. Because you said we cannot wait for 6 months, so we can distribute the executive summary with saying, of course, that the book will follow. That would not be a separate document. It would be part of the book, but we can distribute it earlier to sort of address that question that you raised about the time factor. I think that the time has come that we start saying final things, but very, very quickly, I would like to inform all of you that the idea is this webinar series, and particularly about the Indus water system, came from our good friend, Bob Reynolds. It's I like to give him this credit that he talked to me and he said, look, why can't we have can't we have he had a series on the shivalics of Pakistan, very, very nice and informative series of webinars. And after that, he talked to us and he said, well, look, how about water? It's now a global issue, and we can have a series. And after that, of course, in addition to him, there is a whole team that they contributed a lot. Mukhtar Ghani is particularly thanked because he was the main communicator with all the speakers and among ourselves. And of course, our team here in the center, Benazir and Jaber and others. I'm grateful to the speakers also. By the way, the speakers were very carefully identified. I talked to Dr. Ashraf, I talked to Tariq Banouri, I talked to Isa Daud Pota, and a few other people to identify knowledgeable people who can actually participate and benefit us from their knowledge. So many of the speakers here were suggested by these people from outside our group, the names and their expertise. And I'm grateful to all of you, to all of them. I hope that you'd be happy when you see the book, the recommendations, the executive summary. We will quickly do that. Thank you very much, and stay blessed.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, sir, for such a nice word. Now, I will request all of you guys to turn on your cameras for a group photo, please. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you.